Kevin Ovenden said something about this. I'm going to read you what he said about it in a post that he made just recently. And I think that would sum everything up nicely. The political storm over Le Pen's conviction shows why you need Marxist politics, not just propagandism on the one hand and political agitation on the other. Oh, wait, that's the wrong.
I mean, it is true, though.
He says, the French Prime Minister and the center-right bloc have both today raised concerns about the immediate application of a ban on standing for public office for Le Pen, as opposed to it being held over pending appeal, which is constitutionally what is supposed to happen. What happened, the immediate 5-year ban, not pending appeal, is like an emergency decision of the court. So he says, the danger is that this becomes the central focus of political argument in France. Meanwhile, here are the facts. Le Pen and her party cadres have been found guilty of exactly the same crimes of corruption that have been the stock in trade on the French right, the center-left, and the political class as a whole for decades. That ought to be the line of division in France, for the interests of the common people against the corrupt politicians and their outriders in the form of the very rich Le Pen family. Away with the authoritarian Fifth Republic for a democratic replacement driven by the working class and popular masses from the bottom up. Put that to a popular vote. So, essentially what he's saying is the same criticism that rightists are making right now, which is that it's very possible that she is guilty, but she is guilty of something that pretty much every European does, is use EU funds for their party in general and not just for paying assistance specifically dealing with EU parliamentary matters. So I don't know. I don't know if the appeal will be overturned, but this is essentially selective enforcement of laws, which, like I've seen several other commentators point out, much more egregious violations of funding that were part of the French center-left and receive absolutely no punitive measures. Don't quote me on that. I don't have those instances right in front of me. But that seems to be the zeitgeist right now. That's what people are saying. And if it has become sort of a rallying cry for Jordan Bardella, who's probably going to end up stepping in to take Le Pen's place to lead the charge of Rassemblement National now. I don't know if he's going to be as effective as her, but we'll see.
It kind of makes me think about, kind of reminds me of the way that people in this country talked about how all these charges and suits and besmirching of Trump's name is going to hurt him because now he's tainted forever as the guy with the scandal and it's legally whatever. But really all it did was just like make him into a almost like a martyr figure. Like he was like, has not yet succumbed to the relentless blows of the deep state.
The relentless lawfare against him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I just can't help but think that if you're thinking about French politics over the last decade or so, do we think that that's going to be any different?
No, not at all. Yeah, not at all. I think that every single near miss with Le Pen becomes nearer and nearer every single election cycle. And this is kind of like a last ditch effort to ruin her politically before the next election, which she would almost certainly win. She still got the most votes of any single candidate.
I will say this, that if it's Bardella instead of Le Pen, and if the Mélenchon can actually, receive the backing of the whole left, then maybe it would be helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on in post-fascist news, Estonia, post-fascist state Estonia. I'm just kidding. Just because they worship the SS doesn't mean they're fascists.
No. They're still just liberals.
They're still just liberals that worship the SS because they like the ethno-nationalism and the killing of dirty Slavs and Jews and stuff like that. But also they like the free market.
Yeah, and like free speech. Well, not exactly free speech, but the free market. But the free market in media,
right?
Which is very different, I think, than free speech.
So Estonia has restricted voting rights for Russian speakers. There are currently tens of thousands of stateless Russian speakers who were stranded in Estonia when the USSR collapsed, as well as tens of thousands of permanent residents who have never been given citizenship due to, quote, lack of blood ties to Estonia. And they are they are currently to soften the blow, these stateless non-blood that don't have Estonian blood, these stateless people who are sort of Untermenschen, if you will, not quite up to the standards of Estonian citizenship, were allowed to vote in local elections, but not in national elections. So even some Russian speakers with quote unquote blood ties might be denied citizenship due to not being able to pass Estonian language exams. So essentially, the Russian minority that was bequeathed to Estonia by their independence has always been a minority group with second-class not even citizenship, has always been a permanent underclass that's not allowed to fully integrate into the country because of incorrect ethnicity. And now their status has been reduced even further.
So they're kind of like the Bedouin of Kuwait, not the Bedouin, which is a different thing, but the Bedouin.
The ones who sided with Iraq when Iraq invaded because of their persecuted status.
Yeah, exactly. Because as soon as Kuwait becomes incorporated into the Iraqi state, they all get citizenship. And then once Kuwait was liberated, their citizenship was revoked.
So criticism began to be leveled at Estonia as a result of this racist law that persecutes minorities. He said, the Prime Minister of Estonia responded saying, well, it's their fault for invading Ukraine. If they wouldn't have invaded Ukraine, this wouldn't have happened. The persecuted minority that lives in his country and is denied citizenship due to not being Estonian, it's their fault because Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine. But anyway, so permanent psycho-ethno state, Estonia, with like 1 million people, wants to go to war with Russia so goddamn bad. But since it can't, it'll just do what it can to persecute Russians at home.
Listen, we don't have to go all the way to Ukraine to go to war with the Russians. We could just bother the Russians here.
We could just bother the fucking babushkas that still live here and never became Estonian citizens. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the last bit of news from this section, big Western businesses like Visa, MasterCard, IKEA, and big tech corporations like LG have begun preparing to return to Russia. LG has even reopened one of its facilities and resumed operations in its appliance plant in Moscow.
Huh.
So, on to ceasefire news. Russia says that they will comply with the ceasefire, even though Ukraine is not. And this is the oil and infrastructure ceasefire that I was talking about last week. So I don't know if maybe just because Russia is like reporting every single one, but Ukraine, it seems like they're violating they're doing more attacks against Russian oil infrastructure than they were before the ceasefire. If all of these videos are to be believed, which I think that they should be, because I think that Ukraine knows that it can do whatever the fuck it wants and there will be no consequences, because the Western media is not going to report that Ukraine is breaking the ceasefire.
Yeah, I mean that is the standard for
right.
proxies, you know.
Yeah, and then they can just say, "Oh, actually, we weren't doing that. Russia is lying," and they might piss off Donald Trump and get him to pull out of.
They might, but it just depends on who's in his office that day. You know?
Right? They might piss off. Well, I was going to say, it's possible that they could piss off Donald Trump and have him pull out and stop sending aid, but they know already that there's no more aid coming after this package, that the last of this package that Biden sent runs out. And I think that they've thrown their lot in full with the Europeans anyway. So I think Russia is just saving up all of its instances of the ceasefire violations just so that they could say, yeah, we're not going to renew this and we're not going to work with the Ukrainians because they can't be trusted. Um, and speaking of those oil infrastructure strikes, a study has been done on the cumulative cost of Ukraine's attacks on Russian oil infrastructure. And it turns out that they've done about $5 billion worth of damage in their, about, I guess, 6-month long campaign. And Russia takes in about 20 billion a month in oil sales. So whenever I said last time that these are pinpricks that are not affecting the Russian oil and gas industry,
Right.
this is the definitive proof that it's not really affecting it. It's done
Yeah.
$5 billion in damage. That is something. But of the 180 million that they've taken in since the campaign began, it's really just a pinprick. I have here in my notes that Ukrainians say they aren't doing attacks on Russian energy infrastructure, just like they weren't assassinating separatist leaders in the Donbass.
Oh,
And just like they didn't.
I don't know
help
who
all
was doing those assassinations, but it wasn't
Yeah.
us. Yeah.
They said it was Russia trying to get the Donbass under its control. You know, it's anytime that something bad happens to Russia, they're like, "Oh, Russia, look at them. They're punching themselves."
Well, I
You
mean,
know?
this sort of logic, this sort of methodology, it's very effective for the Israelis.
Yeah, that's true. So Peter Syartov, the Hungarian foreign minister, considers the HIMARS strikes on the gas metering station in Suja as an attack on Hungary because that plant meters the gas that goes into Hungary and directly affects Hungary's ability to get gas from Russia once the conflict is over, because apparently the damage has been extensive. It will take years to repair. So Hungary, who is already hostile to Ukraine and has a vote as to whether or not Ukraine gets into the EU and / or NATO, which is already a no-go, is even more angry at Ukraine than previously. Speaking of being angry, Trump is angry at Putin for, quote, dragging out the talks, and he has threatened 50% tariffs on countries who buy Russian oil if he thinks that it is Russia's fault that the ceasefires are not going through. He says it might not be, but if he thinks that it is, it's not going to be very good for them.
So between threatening sanctions on Russia and threatening tariffs on countries who deal with Russia, do we think that maybe we might stop hearing about the marriage or the bromance between Trump and Putin?
No, not at all.
Oh,
No.